Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to talk about the legacy of Gary Gygax, the true legacy of Gary Gygax, which is an expanding realm that we explore. I think what did Gary Gygax leave behind? I think understanding Gary Gygax is incredibly complex, and I think it can take a lifetime. It's a lifetime's work. I really think when you look back, what he established on this planet the magnitude of it is so great, the complexity of it is so layered that you can spend a lifetime figuring out what Gary Gygax did. Unless you're like, oh, Gary Gygax was a game designer, that's all. I've stopped thinking a long time ago. Like, then I guess it's simple, but if you're thinking, and you refuse to stop thinking about complex things, there's a lot there, okay? All right, so I think I found a new facet of Gary Gygax's true legacy, what he left here, and what it means for us today. All right, so let's talk about what's already established. I've already established this on my channel. I'm going to summarize it real quick. I thought this was like the biggest thing he had left, and I still think it is the biggest thing he had left, but it's certainly not the only thing. And there's something else that's that is very close, if not the same level of it, okay? And that is what Gary Gygax really did. His true legacy is not THAC0, right? It's not a set of rules that have to do with combat. That is the most shriveled view and like small vision, small heart view of what he accomplished you could possibly have, right? And unfortunately, I think a lot of people still have it. So, but what is the truth of it? What's the truth of it is this concept of unbound identity. He freed humanity from living one life, right? Like dungeon masters, speak with 1,000 mouths, live with 1,000 hearts. Dungeon players speak with 100 mouths, live with 100 hearts. We just don't live at the same level other humans live anymore. We have evolved. We've evolved emotionally, we've evolved socially, we've evolved intellectually. We don't live on the same plane as regular humans anymore. We have evolved. The evolution is now, it's here, right? And we're continuing to evolve, right? And it helps us in empathy, it helps us to be more joyful, it helps us to know more. The ramifications are huge, okay? That's not the only thing he left, right? I used to talk about a narrative engine, right? And I think that is important to understand that he created a new narrative engine. But what he really did, when you expand it out and you really understand it, and you see the second stake that Gary drove into the ground, right? That is American history, right? In order to erect a tent that people could come into, is this infinite budget, immediate immersion. Infinite budget, immediate immersion. Okay, now I know that's a lot of words. I wish I could summarize that a little better, but I think it's important to understand what it is. So, since we were drawing paintings on caves, we've been trying to tell stories, right? And we've been fumbling at it. We've had these very antiquated, much less powerful ways to tell stories than Gary established. Gary Gygax established the single most powerful way for a human to tell a story that has ever existed. It surpasses shamanic tales, it surpasses books, it surpasses video games, it surpasses the big and the small screen, okay? The small screen is super easy to surpass, and the big screen is dying, all right? Okay, so what is it? What is this infinite budget, immediate immersion, right? So some schmuck author is like, I'm going to write a book, right? Now, I'm a schmuck author. I've written 2 books, right? So basically he's like, I'm going to write a book, right? Or she says, I'm going to write a book, right? And so she does, right? And she takes 1.5 years to write the thing, and then it goes through another 1.5 years of edits, and then it shows up on the bookshelves, right? Now, it is infinite budget. That's not a small thing. Books have been very powerful because they're not like they're not like so small and big screen, right? They're not like movies and television. They're not like video games, right? Those are very much tied to budget, right? So when Dobby goes on the screen in Harry Potter, the dollars just start ticking away. He is incredibly, it doesn't cost the same to put Hermione on screen as it costs to put Dobby on the screen. Finite budget, right? Which binds the story, right? So Gary gave us this infinite budget narrative engine, right? Now, and that does not exist for video games for big or small screen. They cost a huge amount of money to put things on screen, and it is not cheaper. Now, animation is cheaper than live action, but and that actually means something in Japan, where they use animated stories to tell a diverse amount of stories. But in America, we reject that, and we really haven't elevated animation above live action. Okay, not here in the U.S. People don't really care about animation and cartoons and animated shows in America, not at the level they do with live action, right? So because we have infinite budget, right? We're right out of the gate. We're already beating video games. We're beating, like, when we put a character into our story, we can make them look any way we want. We have no concerns from a budget perspective. If we want them to have perfect, luxurious clothes, it doesn't cost any more than if we were going to make them look like peasants, right? But this is very real in video games and in small screen and big screen. They're trapped, right? Now, so we have defeated those other storytelling and those other narrative engines because we're not bound to finite budget, okay? Now, when it comes to immediate immersion, right? That's where what Gary really created, this infinite budget immediate immersion, really shines, okay? So if you're going to put out a book, it can be literally 3 years before anybody sees what you were talking about. And I have seen this. One of the worst examples I've ever seen of this is a woman who wrote a book called Spinster, right? It took her like a year and a half to write it, and then it took like a year and a half to get through the editors and get through the print publishers. And when it was time for her to really, like, say Spinster, like, it was like, it wasn't fiction. It was like a treatise on being a spinster, right? Like, and so how, it should be freeing and we should be proud of it. But she had a boyfriend, and I think she was even engaged. Like, she was engaged. So she wrote Spinster and then went on a books tour saying, "Be proud of being alone. Here's my fiance." It was like the worst. It was the worst optics possible. It was just so bad, right? Like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, and when do we bring our stories to the table? We bring our stories to the table every single week, right? And it's arguable that if you did that, I think if you had won the lottery and you dedicated yourself to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you could run 2 games a week. So I think it takes 3 days to prep properly for a Dungeons & Dragons story. So, and there's nowhere where this can be done, right? There's nobody who can match us except Shamanic Tales, which have died. They haven't died at the exception level, but they have certainly died at the macro level. Nobody's listening to shamans today. There's no 51% of the world listening to shamans anymore. It just doesn't happen. I don't even think there's a single nation where 51% of the people listen to shamans today. They certainly live in the exception, but they don't live at the macro level, right? So we've defeated shamans. Shamans are the only one who could create stories faster than us, right? But it doesn't matter because they've lost, and we didn't beat them. They just died out, right? Like, at the macro level, not at the exception level. I know there's still a few shamans left, but like their entire structure, like tribes and people, it's not. Our world isn't structured like that right, anymore. Okay, so video games. But it's been so easy to beat video games. Like, it's actually a major conversation in the world that, like, video games tell terrible stories, and that's why they can't make a single decent film, right? Like, that's why nothing can be converted from their stories, right? And it only gets worse. Like, every video game story is, here's a story, and here's your DLC for the day. Like, there's so many interruptions to them telling any kind of powerful stories. Big screen, we don't have to beat them. They're dying right now. Small screen, we crush them, right? We have an infinite budget, they have a finite budget, and we have immediate immersion. We can bring our stories to the table every 3 days, right? And get this, not only is our stories written beforehand with, just a collection of notes and tailored to our players, but we can tailor literally in the moment. We can tailor to the exact emotions of the experience of the story. So the infinite budget, immediate immersion narrative engine, the infinite budget immediate immersion model that Gary produced has shattered every single storytelling vector that exists. They're all relics now, right? They're all antiquated junk. Like this, the new model, the best stories in the world are told with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition because Gary created Dungeons & Dragons and it's been carried through 3 companies, and we now live in a world where the best stories can be told in the world by any vector are told at our tables. We own storytelling now, right? Everyone is behind us. The big screen, the small screen, video games, books, shamans, they're all behind us. We've defeated them with the power of what Gary Gygax created in 1974. A infinite budget, immediate immersion model that allows us to attach our storytelling to 4 players, hyper-focused on literally what they're feeling in the moment. No other narrative engine in the world can do what we do. We win. That's my opinion. I'd like to hear what you think. Do you see what I see? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.